Hey everybody, what is going on? Brendan Miller here, back with another video, and in this video I want to talk about 10 baits that I always try to keep in my tackle box. Now when it comes to making fishing videos, I like fishing for a wide variety of species, anything from largemouth bass to walleye, so I have to keep a wide variety of baits on hand in order to fit those different fishing scenarios. So today we're going to go over 10 baits that I always try to have on me. If I have these 10 baits in my tackle box, I feel fairly confident that I can fish pretty much any fishing scenario. With that being said, let's jump right in. Let's jump right in with the most obvious bait right here, the one that I talk about a lot and use a lot, the squirrel crankbait. This bait just flat out works. When it comes to catching bass in my local lakes and rivers, the squarebill crankbait is my go-to bait. I have caught the majority of my bass throughout the years on this bait right here. It seems to just work wonders. When it comes to the actual brand of crankbait, I love the KVD 1.5s. This is not a KVD 1.5, this is kind of an off-brand, but it still works just fine. I don't have any KVD 1.5s because I lost them all, because I fish with them all the time. Now when it comes to fishing creeks and rivers, I also like to carry tiny micro crankbaits on hand, especially the crankbaits by Rebel. This is the Bumblebee by Rebel right here. I also love the crawfish right here. Got two sizes of the crawfish, got the bigger one and the smaller one. The great thing about these small crankbaits is that pretty much anything will bite them. It doesn't matter where you fish them, you can fish them in lakes and rivers. I love having these baits on hand for finesse situations when the water's a little bit cold or maybe I'm fishing more of a pressured lake. Throwing a tiny little crankbait like this can be dynamite. I've caught in bass excess of 4 pounds on stuff like this, so it's definitely not just for small fish. I always try to keep these on hand. Like I said, I use the Rebel brand. I find that they are the most inexpensive and they work right out of the package fairly well. So those are the ones that I go for. Another classic bait that I always try to have on hand is the swim jig right here. This is a Strike King swim jig with one of my signature series swim baits on the back. And as you can see, it's torn up a lot. I was fishing it recently and was doing very well with it. A swim jig like this is one of my go-tos, especially when I'm fishing lakes that are a little more pressured. Maybe the fish are a little bit more finicky. And the thing I love the most about a swim jig is that it imitates a bluegill perfectly, especially this Strike King one right here. The particular color I believe is actually bluegill. This imitates a bluegill so well, and in most of the lakes and rivers that I fish, bluegill is the primary source of food for a lot of predators. This is basically like a finesse version of the squarebill crankbait, except you can fish it at a variety of depths. You can fish it near the surface, you can fish it down deep. This bait is money. Another bait that I love to have on hand at all times is the humble spoon, especially when it comes to vertical jigging for fish. A spoon is one of my favorite things to fish. I love throwing it into deep water and stroking it back, and you never know what you're going to catch with this thing. That's the great thing. It catches pretty much anything. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this model of the spoon right here. This is a cheap one that I got off Amazon, and it's pretty cheap and not very heavy. It works okay, but it's not the best. I'd recommend you go to Walmart and pick up something like a little Clio. That's going to be a lot better built, and a simple chrome spoon can do wonders. The next bait I always love to have on hand, and a bait that is, in my opinion, one of the most versatile baits that you can throw, is the humble spinner right here. This is a MEPS spinner. In my opinion, MEPS is like the best bang for your buck. They're not super expensive. The blades spin really, really nice. It puts off a ton of vibration, and I like getting the ones with the feathered trailer to add that extra little bit of attraction. Anything that swims in the water and eats other fish, a spinner can catch, and that is what is so great about it. It's not just for fishing for trout and smallmouth. You can throw this in lakes, you can catch pike, you can catch bass with it, you can catch walleye. It pretty much catches anything, and that's why I love to have it. When I'm fishing a new body of water, a lot of times I'll just tie on a spinner and see what's biting, and like I said, this MEPS right here, it works really, really well. Now, this bait has recently become one of my favorite baits to throw. I've talked about it a lot in other videos, but I thought it needed another mention again in this video because it is that good. The simple curly tail grub and jig head. This combination has been dynamite for me. I've caught everything on it from largemouth bass to walleye, to perch, to crappie, to smallmouth. Again, pretty much anything that swims in the water, this little bait will catch. It's super simple to use. You throw it out, you can jig it, you can reel it. This is a great bait for new anglers as well. If I'm taking people fishing and I want to rig them up with something that's not too complicated, a simple jig head and a curly tail grub will do just fine. It's very easy to fish, and like I said, it catches fish. As far as the actual model of the grubs I like to use the power bait grubs right here. This is kind of in a silver white color. I like the power bait grubs because they have that extra scent, and that helps when the fishing is a little bit tough right there. The great thing about these is that you can fish them a number of different ways. You can put a heavy jig head on this thing and really fish it really aggressively, or you can put a really light jig head on it and have it just kind of flutter down. The options are endless, so I always try to keep these on hand. Alright, let's talk about plastics real quick. There are 3 types of plastics I always like to keep on hand. Obviously, the Senko is one of them, but I didn't include it on this list because I've mentioned it in other videos. I love to keep a good swim bait on hand. These are my Signature Series swim baits right here, and let me tell you, they're some of the best swim baits I've ever used. I'm not just saying that because I designed them. These are the bomb.com. I designed this bait to be fished on a jig head. I like throwing swim baits on a jig head. I don't really like belly hooking them, and this bait, in my opinion, has a realistic shad profile in the water, and it does fantastic on the back of a swim jig, on a jig head, on the back of a chatterbait, whatever you want to throw it on. This thing is great. I've caught a ton of bass on it, and I always try to keep these on hand because you never know when they're going to come in handy. The next bait I love to have on hand at all times is the Berkley Gulp Minnow. I like having it in 2 colors. I like the Fire Tiger color and the traditional smelt color. These are the 3-inch models right here, and yeah. Again, when the fishing is tough, when I need to slow down and get those finicky fish to bite, this is what I reach for. The Fire Tiger especially is fantastic, especially in a little more stained conditions when I'm fishing rivers and streams. This is one of my go-tos right here. This on a jig head, it does fantastic. They catch pretty much anything, and I always try to keep these on hand. Again, it's way more easy than carrying live bait around. The scent is fantastic. I will say this, I am not a super big proponent of scenting your baits, but Berkley Gulp, in my opinion, they're doing something right because fish attack these baits with a vengeance like I'm fishing live bait. Now, to be fair, these are not as good as live bait, but they are very close, and that is why I always like to have them on hand. I always like having a live bait alternative on hand for those super finicky fish. Another Berkley Gulp product I like to have on hand at all times is their Killer Crawler right here. This is basically just like a little night crawler. The first video I ever made on YouTube was comparing these little Berkley Gulp night crawlers to live bait, and surprise, surprise, they actually outfished live bait in that one scenario. But yeah, these are great. Quiet. Sorry, the rooster's being loud. Like I said, these baits are fantastic. I love throwing this particular model for panfish, bluegill, perch, crappie, that kind of thing. They work so well, and they look like crazy realistic. They're kind of creepy looking. That's how realistic these night crawlers work. Alrighty guys, and we come down to number 10. One of my favorite baits this year so far has been a simple blade bait. If you guys go back and watch my recent video where I was wading and fishing for smallmouth, this bait right here was the bait that got me fish consistently all day long. This particular model right here is a Johnson blade bait right here. This is in a Fire Tiger. I like having a Fire Tiger and a silver on hand. And the great thing about this bait is that it is cheap. It's like $1 something at Walmart. So you can pick up a ton of these things and they're not going to break the bank. That is one of the main reasons why I love having these things. They're inexpensive and they are very versatile. These are kind of like a hybrid between a spoon, a spinner, and a lipless crankbait, and they are fantastic. Like I said, very versatile. They're quite heavy, so you can throw them a long distance, especially on lighter line. One of the reasons why I like having this bait on hand is that you can fish it at pretty much any depth. This bait is incredible. I've caught a wide variety of fish on it, anything from walleye to catfish, to hybrid striped bass. This bait gets her done. I love throwing it. Like I said, you can cast it quite far, and you can fish it at pretty much any depth. It puts off a lot of vibration. It doesn't have any rattles in it. I think if you're fishing a heavily pressured... Shush, please, shush. I'm trying to shoot a video. It does not have any rattles in it, so it's a little more stealthy when you're fishing for fish that are a little more finicky. But yeah, this bait has been fantastic. So far this year, this bait has been really good. I highly recommend you pick them up. So guys, there you go. Those are the 10 baits that I try to have in my tackle box at all times. By the way, if you want to pick up some of my Signature Series swim baits, there is a link in the description for that as well. Thank you guys for watching this video, and as always, stay hooked. I'll see you later.